the thing about big companies is one no can kill your idea. So if you need to get yes from everyone. You need buy-in from everyone, and one no can kill your idea. The thing about startups is you can get 50 no's. Doesn't matter. As long as you get that one yes, that one person that believes in you, could be an investor, could be a first user, first customer, first employee, first hire. You just need that one yes.
This is Rahul Sonwalkar. Let's start off with, what was the first project that you can remember building when you were a kid?
I signed up for Gmail with rahulsonwalkar@gmail.com, and then I forgot my password when I was like 11, and Gmail wouldn't give me my account back. So I tried to create a email service with a different domain so that I could get Rahul at the domain.com. And then I got like 12 of my friends to sign up for it too, so they could all get their first names. I guess a couple of decades later, or a decade and a half later, we can see hey.com tried something similar, but it was like hey.com before hey.com.
Yeah. Do you remember, like, was that before the Social Network movie came out?
It was literally when the movie came out. So
Yeah.
I watched the movie when I was like 11 or 12, and I think that movie is what got me into like tech. I had no exposure to tech growing up. My family wasn't really into tech. But the movie is what got me into building things with software. Like you can literally build something in your computer and then millions of people use it. That's kind of fascinating. So it was like right around the time when the movie came out.
Yeah. Do you remember, like, so was this the first project that you worked on directly after watching that movie? Or did you have like any, I don't know, things that you tried when you were even younger?
There were a lot of things I tried when I was younger. So for this one time, somebody got me like a small aquarium when I was a kid as a gift, and then I tried to flip that for like more money. I would do stuff like that all the time, but after the movie, I felt the agency to like go solve my problems with like code. Before the movie, it didn't really like sit with it didn't really click for me that you could actually like go write code and like can make money with that, and like it can actually solve your problems. Like, oh, Gmail took your email, like you can just like go make a new email
What
thing.
was the domain that you got?
I think it was like a 5 letter, like something with a G, with a just a shitty domain name that I could find for like $8, because I was broke. And it didn't matter if it was like a memorable domain. What mattered was that you could get your first name or a shorter
So it could just
email.
be yours.
It's just yours, yeah.
Yeah. What was the like next thing that you worked on?
Naturally, after that, I tried to build a social network, because I'd seen the movie, and I had this like thick book on like PHP and MySQL, and it had simple things like how to make a profile on a website and how to like have login authentication. So I took all those pieces and like barely glued it together, and no one used it. It was like a lesson that it's not, you can't like copy an idea and
Like hope it will succeed.
hope it will succeed.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, later on, you learn all these fundamental things like network effects, and you need to have like a hook to bring people into your product. Back then I didn't know any of that, but I still learned how to write login and authentication code, and that turned out to be much useful later.
Yeah. So how many times have you basically like tried to launch something or create something and had basically just no response from the world
Oh,
for Julius? Because I remember you talking about like the
Yeah.
podcast comments, and you just launched that and then nothing happened.
yes. So this is, fast forward to COVID. I was pretty lonely. Everyone, all my friends were logged in the lockdowns indoors. And I had just moved to San Francisco out of college in Texas. So all my friends were still back in school. And I was really this new person, new in this new town. And I would spend a lot of time on podcasts, just kind of like filling in the time in my life with like people
Which
talking.
ones were there?
I did some Joe Rogan, but back when he was on YouTube. I did Acquired podcast, a lot of like startups, founders podcast. David Sendra is the goat. So just the classics. And one thing I would always find interesting when I would watch Joe Rogan on YouTube is I would go to the comments and read the comments. And the comments were like an additional add-on to the content. There was a discussion, there were some jokes, and I would miss that when Joe Rogan and some of these podcasts moved to Spotify because they don't have a comment section. So I tried to build podcastcomments.com. You could literally just take any podcast link and just have a unified comment section. It made so much sense in my head, the idea. Sometimes you just need to get the ideas out there and you realize like it only makes sense to you and nobody else.
And how much time did you like spend on that before you launch it and realize like, damn?
This was the first mobile app I built.
Mhm.
So it took me like a month to get this thing, bare bones version of it out. And the sad thing was it's like pre AI. So like you just read the documentation and try to learn how to write mobile code. I wish I did some validation before that. Like I wish I shipped a bare bones version or shipped some marketing before I actually wrote the first line of code to like get validation that someone
Like
else.
someone would actually want it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I've to answer your original question, which is how many times have I launched something and failed? Countless times. It's kind of every time I launched something new, I was at a point where failure was default.
Yeah.
And in some ways that's a very scary position. Like, why would you even try if you know you're gonna fail? But at the same time, it's kind of liberating. It frees you to like try things.
Because you feel like you won't necessarily look stupid because no one will see it.
Yeah.
Or,
This guy's just he's gonna launch this new thing and it's not gonna work.
yeah.
So it's super liberating because then you stop kind of like being in your head too much and doing analysis paralysis, and you just go try things. So I think that early failure I'm very glad that happened to me, and it was very liberating.
Yeah. Do you have any other really good stories? Because I know that you, like, was it before you joined Uber that you were basically trying to track trucks, or was it after?
After.
After.
Yeah. But
Okay.
I had a startup before that
Oh,
in college.
Let's talk about
So I ended up going to college at this state school in Texas because my family was like, hey, if you want to go to college, you can go, but you just have to find a way to pay for it. And so I found a school that would give me a full ride. So I ended up at the state school in Texas, and while like the full ride was awesome, the people around me were just not at the same level of ambition. All they wanted to do was just finish the classes, go home, go to the career fair, get a job at Raytheon or Allstate or an insurance company. That social network
that. So you were
energy.
just like starved for ambition.
I was starved. Yeah, it's just that social network energy of like, hey, you can just build something in your dorm room and get a bunch of users, and build something big was just not there. So I started going to a lot of hackathons. Go to these hackathons back in 2016 and meet people that were just trying to build things on the weekends. I made a lot of friends there that ended up eventually like referring me to companies in Silicon Valley. But back then, what I noticed was a lot of these hackathons would spend time getting their project just set up. Like, the fundamentals like login, database, backend service, like all that, spinning that up would just take up half of your hackathon time, and then the other half would be actually working on the project. So I tried to build something there. It was called Waterview, and it would let you basically spin up all that out of the box, so you can actually focus on the actual project and not worry about these details. It got some traction. It got some downloads. I would go to hackathons and like get people to use it, and they would like it. An important lesson I learned there was the people that went to these hackathons would never actually end up working on the projects outside of the hackathons. So the retention was basically zero. So that's where I learned, retention matters. Like, you need to build something that people are going to want to use daily or weekly, or as a part of their job. Another useful lesson.
How did you like just get people to sign up? Did you just walk up to them and say, download my thing?
Yeah. So these hackathons are basically like, like 500 sweaty college students, computer science students in a big, converted basketball stadium or like a big hall, and you spend the like first half of the hackathon just getting set up. And I would go to these hackathon students at the start of the hackathon and just tell them like, guys, you could literally just download Waterview and be faster than everyone else in this hackathon and win the prize. And it would take them 5 minutes to set up, get them off the ground. They would go build a project on top of it. You can think of it as like Supabase. It's like a startup.
Good
that
analogy.
Yeah. So it was Supabase before Supabase. I didn't have the technical chops to really build a Supabase quality product. And also I did not have the right target customer base. I was giving this out to like hackathon goers that weren't building things outside of hackathons.
Yeah. Has there been any like specific person? For me, it was like Warren Buffett that I really look up to. Has there been any person you've looked up to a lot that's you're kind of trying to mirror their trajectory in any way?
I think for me it was Bill Gates. So if you talk about tech, it's Bill Gates. If you talk about outside of tech, it's Napoleon. My mom
What do you like about Napoleon?
Well, my mom just told me this story this one time when I was a little kid that Napoleon, his ambition was so massive that he wanted to conquer the world. And when you're like a 7-year-old, that you don't know what that means, but it feels like massive. It feels grandiose. And then she would tell me how he would work so hard that he would nap while he was riding his horse so that he could like continue working when he gets off his horse. And those kinds of stories were pretty cool. And then I started reading about Bill Gates and Microsoft, or the history of Microsoft, which I think was super fascinating because Microsoft, I think, is a really special company. They've built a massive business. How many tech companies do you remember from the 70s that last today? Just two, Microsoft and Apple.
Yeah.
And just his competitive drive, his contrarian bet on software for the first 5 years of the personal computer industry. Nobody wanted to bet on software because they thought software is just code. It's free. Today we think of software as the greatest business model ever. You have like 70% gross margins. This is the best business model ever. You have multiple trillion-dollar companies that sell just software.
Software used to be like hardware on, floppy disks and stuff.
Yes. And so he had this super early bet that software is going to be the differentiator. And then the way he went and captured the market by getting every PC provider to offer Windows and make it Windows compatible so that all the application software that gets built on top of that is Windows compatible, and then you just can't compete. So I think that level of prescience, that level of drive is really, really special. And I think Bill Gates is great. I mean, today we think of Bill Gates as this guy who's doing a lot of charitable work in like vaccines, but up until like the early 2000s, like
he was like this conqueror.
Yeah, and the DOJ had to come in and neutralize him.
Exactly.
It's crazy, right? It's Bill Gates versus the people of the United States, and
for the world.
yeah. It's they had to step in and neutralize, but I think he was a very dominant figure.
Do you have any good stories of doing things like I remember on Turner's podcast, you said something along the lines of like getting in people's trucks or something.
Trucks.
I believe, and like tracking trucks.
Yeah.
How did you? What was that business?
Yeah.
And like how did you start it and why'd you start it?
So when I was at Uber, I was in the pricing team, and you do pricing, like you figure out how much to charge for a ride, and all that is so simple because Uber has real-time data on where your driver is and where you are as a rider, so they can track wait times, pickup, drop-off, ETAs, and all that data, that real-time location data, they have that, which simplifies so much overhead. Turns out logistics doesn't have that. They're so old school that they pick up their phone and call the truck driver. If you have your own fleet, if you're Amazon, you have like devices on the trucks that will help you track your trucks. But Amazon is a small percentage of all logistics. Most of logistics, like 80%, is 3PLs, like third-party logistics providers. And those truck drivers, you just literally call them and you ask them, hey, are you going to be at drop off at 4 p.m.? And if they're not at drop off at 4 p.m., they're like 15 minutes late, then your next shipment
It's also late.
Is also late.
It's delayed. And
because you have one loading dock, and that you can't just park a semi truck on a street. You have to go park in a parking lot somewhere else.
And how many trucks are there like on the road? Is it like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands?
Oh, hundreds. I think there's like millions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the idea was, well, the US government in 2018 created this like new regulation where all trucks have to have this tracking device called ELD. So they could track the number of hours that each driver drove, and they could regulate that, not more than 11 hours because it's not safe for the roads and all that. So the idea there was, hey, if you could get that data from all these trucks, you can make it really easy. You don't have to make new hardware. You can just make it really easy for these, logistics companies to get real-time location data. And the logistics companies, the shippers, brokers, all of them were super pumped because it solves so much overhead for them. The downside was it was basically impossible to convince truck drivers to share their location data. They just
didn't really want it.
Just didn't want it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to convince somebody that's done something a certain way for a few decades.
How did you like get in touch with? So how many like truck drivers did you actually end up talking with? And then how did you get in touch with them? And what was their response?
Yeah. Well, the response was just hell no. Yeah. So the response was hell no. I talked to like hundreds of truck drivers. There's spots around San Francisco that are like trucking hubs. Mm-hmm. So Lodi, California, in the East Bay, and Stockton, and all those places have like big hubs for trucks. And I would just go talk to those people. As an engineer.
You sound like an early Sam Walton, where he's just like just staying in the distribution centers, talking with the truck drivers to see what's going on at each of the stores.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Sam Walton because people think of Walmart as this, old company that is not technology forward. Walmart was super
the original,
the OG. Yeah. They were the first company to like really adopt like computers and set up like their own private networks of the different distribution centers could talk to different Walmart locations. And all the POS data gets sent back to their inventory management system so they can like ship the goods fast. They were just the pioneers of that. And I really wonder if, how the Amazon story would have played out if Sam
hadn't existed.
If Sam was around in the internet age. So Sam died, I believe, in 1991, Sam Walton. And Amazon was started like 3 years after that.
94, yeah.
94, yeah. So I really wonder if Sam at his prime in the
competing
internet
against
age.
Bezos.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because like Bezos, I believe, walked around handing out the like Made in America biography to all of his executives and like all the Amazon team members, early days.
I love it.
So yeah, dude was a goat.
I love it.
Okay, so you basically hear a whole bunch of no's from a whole bunch of truck drivers. When did you decide like this is just not going to work and there's nothing that I can do to make it work?
So, we had a lot of yeses from not truck drivers. The people that booked these truck drivers to move their truckloads, they all really wanted this thing. They were like, take our money. We want to use this thing. So we closed some sales before we even thought of talking to the truck drivers.
Really?
Yeah. And then
so you got some like false hope traction.
False hope, exactly. I think the need was there. And then after like months of just banging on doors and trying, it really came down to whether this is the most important thing I can spend my time on. As an engineer, this is back in 2022, pre-ChatGPT, like the boom. But I was spending a lot of my time playing with GPT-3. I was just fascinated with like GitHub Copilot and how, when I would write code for tracking and like location data, it would just know what Python module to import in my IDE, and I didn't have to like look it up on Stack Overflow. And to me, that was very cool. And And I was just fascinated by that and spending a lot of time playing with that. So I decided to go do that instead.
Yeah. When did you decide to start Julius? Because I think you were in like the summer batch of YC
Yeah.
2022.
Yeah.
So when did you decide to like start Julius? And then this was like pre ChatGPT, so you were just working with like GPT-3, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It wasn't called Julius back
Okay.
then. Yeah. We had a bunch of different names. The initial idea was like you have these language models are getting really good at writing code. And I had seen at companies like Uber and Facebook, they're very data science driven. So Facebook, everything from feed recommendation to like you know content recommendation to your friends all that is super data science driven and ML driven. Similarly at Uber, pricing, routing, all that is super data driven.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see if you could leverage language models getting really good at writing code to get that power data science into the hands of everyone. Let's say you're a finance person. Let's say you're a CFO, and your company collects a fuck ton of data across all the different parts of the company, from sales to product to like recruiting. You have all the data is right there. It's you just feel helpless because you can't go analyze it on your own. You can't ask questions about the data. So could you use these models getting really good to like help you write the analysis code? That was the initial idea. We didn't know what that was going to look like. We ended up launching like 4 different iterations of that. We called it like text to SQL, and like tried to get big databases of the internet that we could demonstrate. You can actually like ask questions about the
And
data.
how long between these different launches? Like how
A
long was
year.
it? A year. Oh,
Yes.
so you started like a year before.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And we got a cease and desist from
Oh, wonderful.
Microsoft.
Really?
Yeah, because we launched this thing called Excel Copilot. So I still own excelcopilot.com,
Beautiful.
which is like a Microsoft product.
Yeah.
And we were initially like using that name, and they sent us they're like, you gotta stop right now. Apparently the best thing you can do is just kind of
Ignore it.
ignore and just continue building.
Keep going.
Yeah, because the lawyers, they'll always try to stop you from creating value in the world, right? Turns out like when you start building things, there are always going to be people that will tell you why something won't work or shouldn't work. Either it's because it hurts their interests, it's because sometimes it proves that they lack agency.
Yeah.
When you're at a big
It's the
company,
tall poppy syndrome. Where
what is the
basically
syndrome?
it's basically like I forgot exactly where this comes from, but where like if the grass, if you're a blade of grass and you grow up taller than the rest of the grass, someone
Yeah.
cuts your head off.
Yeah.
And that's the tall poppy syndrome. So if you like strive for more and it's more than what people think is like reasonable or normal, they'll be
Yeah.
like, actually, I'm going to try and shut you down
Yes.
just to stop you.
Yes.
Because
Exactly.
I don't feel good about my own place a lot in life.
Yes. Exactly. So you spot on. So like there's incumbents will try to tell you why you shouldn't do something, or people will try to tell you why you shouldn't do something because it shows their lack of agency.
Did you experience that at like Dallas, the university, where you were like wanting to start a company or something, and people like were kind of against it, or
My professors thought I was so I would basically pick courses where most of the credit was the exams. So if you skip all the assignments and homework and projects, but just crush the midterm and the final, and you get an A-, like that's good enough for me. It's like the 80-20 rule, right? So I never had like a straight like 4.0, but my whole thesis was like, you could really like pull an all-nighter before the test and just study the semester worth of content in a night and like get an A-.
you're
Getting an A is
optimizing for like good enough?
good, yeah, because then I could spend all my time
Yeah.
the rest of the semester just doing projects that I want to actually work on. So professors thought I was crazy for like missing those assignments, but I optimally chose courses where the assignments didn't have a lot of credit. I think when I was at big companies like Facebook and Uber, I always looked up to these companies because of their founders. Travis built a great company. There's some great stories from Uber in the early days, and I wanted to go work there. I wanted to go work there and learn how.
From like Travis
Yeah,
or like from Mark.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think Facebook in many ways is still a killer company because it's still founder led. Uber is not. So when I got to these companies, I felt so much bureaucratic inertia
Yeah.
on everything you want to do. You know, the thing about big companies is one no can kill your idea. So you need to get yes from everyone. You need buy-in from everyone, and one no can kill your idea. The thing about startups is you can get 50 no's. Doesn't matter. As long as you get that one yes, that one person that believes in you, could be an investor, could be a first user, first customer, first employee, first hire. You just need that one yes. You can get 50 no's. And all that matters is that one yes, and then you claw your way from there.
Yeah, I like the whole like you launched 4 or 5 different times because I remember this line from Brian Chesky where he says like if you launch and no one notices, you can just keep launching.
Yeah.
You launch Airbnb 3 times, you know?
Yeah.
So when did you actually get that like first believer? At what point?
So we weren't really we were on the right thread, but we weren't really building the right thing. We were trying SQL. SQL is kind of limiting because you can't really do a complex analysis with SQL,
Mhm.
and there's only so much SQL code on the internet that the models have been trained on. Python, there's just like a lot more Python code. It's much easier to do an iterative analysis in Python. In Python, you have this ecosystem of Python modules that are that's really powerful for analysis. So that hadn't clicked for us yet. So the first 4 things we tried were SQL, and then the 5th thing we tried was Python. We called it Julius.
And why did you call it Julius?
Well, I've just been obsessed with Roman history. So when I incorporated the company, I called it Caesar Labs because Julius Caesar, and I just read a lot of Roman history, just the classic meme. I'm not unique in that sense. I'm sure there's a lot of your listeners.
A lot of founders like Roman.
Yeah.
A lot of founders like emperors.
Yeah.
Napoleon.
So exactly. So that was me. And coincidentally, we ended up launching on Julius Caesar's birthday, July 12th. We were supposed to launch July 10th, and because of a last minute delay, we had to push the launch by 2 days so we could fix a few bugs. And just ended up being Julius Caesar's birthday. We realized like a year later.
Just on accident?
On accident.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's wild. Was that when were you in YC at that point?
A year out of IC.
A year out of YC?
Yeah.
Wait, so did you get basically zero traction until 2023?
Well, there was traction. It wasn't durable traction.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that experience of just like launching stuff, having it not work, and then like learning from it, just keep on going?
Yeah. I think it's so it's part of it is intuition, part of it is like data, but basically it's one of the hardest things is whether you keep going on the same thread or you start over from scratch. And you're going to be wrong many times. You make that call. Sometimes you would, even in Julius, we decide whether to like build a feature or not, or if you launch a feature, does it take off right away, or do we need more iteration on that, or do we need to focus on something else? It's just like you ever play Civ?
Yes.
It's like you're managing resources, right? You have like time, energy, money, and I think the most important resource is morale. People, I think startups die because of like lack of morale. Like you read about like Napoleon's like Waterloo campaign, and it's like they were so outnumbered, but they had so much morale, and they just wanted to fight for Napoleon. Like
You're just
excited, right? You can do a lot more if you have super high morale and momentum, but low on other resources. But you can't really like use money and other things to build morale.
Yeah.
So you're playing this video game. You have like these resources, and you have to make something work, right? And you decide where to allocate resources, where to pull resources. So in the super early days, it's like, do we keep building this idea, or do we like change the idea, or
Yeah, like pivot.
or pivot? Yeah. So luckily for us, we ended up building on analysis with AI. We just didn't know what that was going to look like. We had some ideas, like maybe the AI writes SQL for you, it'll query a database for you. Maybe it will like make charts for you. We weren't super sure what that was going to look like, but
Was the general thread just like helping people understand their data and like visualize things just in a more simpler way?
Yeah. Well, it turns out like data is very ubiquitous. People just have data.
Yeah.
You're a marketer, you have marketing data. You're a finance person, you have finance data. You're an ops person, you have ops data. People, the need for insights is there. You always have questions about the data, but what was missing was that how do I get the insights out of the data? And turns out like AI can help you with that. And so if you stay on a thread, I think the learnings compound. You launch, don't get users. You try to debug why. Do we build the wrong thing? Then you launch again, you get some users. And they retain. Some of them retain, some of them don't. The ones that retain, you figure out like what were they trying to do in the product? Like what did they need this for? And I think Nikita Beer had a similar thing where they launched like 8 times before TBH.
I think it was like 7 different apps or something crazy, and they were like just about to give up, and then I think it was like 6 years or something crazy like that.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't have to do it for 6 years. It was just 1 year.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of the same thing where like if you're building stuff since you're a kid, you are kind of working for 6 years, or 10 years, but you're just working on different threads.
Yeah.
When was the first time? I know that the like GPT story was a big inflection point for Julius.
Yeah.
When was the first time that you like launched something or launched, some iteration of Julius and it like actually worked? People were excited.
It was July 2023. And we did get a lot of our early users from there. And then OpenAI basically shut it down overnight. And so that's where we pulled up Brian Chesky, where we just relaunched. We realized at that point we had users, we had paying users, and we had used those users to tweak the products that actually worked really well and served, the users really well. And we had found something that had like PMF. We just need to like get it out there. And so our main source of users is like disappearing overnight. What do we do next?
How many users did you get from the GPT?
Oh, it was like a few thousand.
Okay, yeah. So it was reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was the GPT plugin store.
Yeah.
We had already launched Julius in July, but we just called that the beta. And then we're like, all right, we're out of beta now.
The official one.
Yeah,
this exactly. Is the official V1 launch.
Exactly.
Right.
So, so we did that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So building off of like that initial momentum, how did you get the next? I think you like pretty quickly went from, I don't know, that first few thousand to like 500,000, and that's what you had roughly until like a year ago.
Yeah. So we definitely like sharing what we're building with people has helped. I think if you put yourself in the shoes of the user, I think the customers, they have this fatigue of trying a thing, and then you realize that it's not being actively iterated on, and they aren't building new things in it. They aren't taking the model advancements and turning those into features that help you use the product better. So in Julius, for example, you can click on like when you have kind of data set, you can just click on like columns, and we will take the point and click data and have AI generate like a chart for you before you even write a prompt. That level of like attention to detail, it
like predicts what you want it to do.
Yeah. So let's say you click on revenue and like customer lifetime. It will just show you, you probably want to look at like customer lifetime, and how does that affect revenue. So we basically, because that attention to detail, it only comes when you've like built something with a lot of love and attention to what users want. Um, and the opposite of this is like users get served slop. It's slop, and then they pay for the product and they realize that 6 months later it's the same product. And so we actively launch new things on social media. We talk about what we're building. We iterate with users, and that compounds because then people start spreading the word. So today, like word of mouth and SEO end up being like the two big drivers for Julius.
Yeah. Do you know like how much time you spend a day probably like talking with users?
It really depends on the day. There's so for example, when we were launching workflows, we did not know if we hadn't quite figured out those micro interactions in workflows. And so my priority became just reaching out to power users, offering them to hop on a call. Like I'll literally make a workflow for you, and making a workflow for them, understanding like what are the pain points there, and then switching that switching that to like letting them make the workflow and like observing how they use and what are the things that are confusing to them. Like, it really depends on the day. Like there could be a day where if something is like the top priority, it's like we need to get user feedback on this thing. Like let's go do that. We don't have any support people on the company. The engineers do support. Everyone in the company does support. I've personally answered 5,100 support tickets. Matt, our CTO, has answered like 3,500 support
Is
tickets.
this like a KPI?
We
How
should
many?
probably make it a KPI. And so I think that's um I
Yeah,
think
well, that
important.
was one of the things that I was like very impressed by, but was you just seem to like really care about making people happy. You, I-
Okay,
it,
I'm
it
glad.
seems it
Yeah,
seems like that should be obvious, but it
yeah.
doesn't seem to be as obvious. You've been very good so far, at least, about basically building your own personal brand. And how do you think about doing that?
I think when people try to build a personal brand, they um I'm curious. What do you think about personal? I'm curious, like, what as a third person, how would you describe my personal brand?
A comedic undertone with like obvious seriousness. Like you clearly are making something real while also having a good time doing it.
Yeah,
And like it's enjoyable to watch the ride.
yeah, love that. Okay, so I guess my answer to the question of like how do you build that is you just have to be yourself. I think people try to copy somebody's style way too hard. Um, for me, like this is how I am outside of this interview. Like, if you work with me in the office, like sometimes I'm making some jokes. Um, sometimes it's like serious. I think it's important to like have fun, keep it lighthearted, but also work on things that are important, that are serious. Like your life is not a joke. You want to work on things that are serious. So um, I think I'm just being me right now.
Yeah. What traits do you look for in like potential, hires?
Yeah,
Traits.
yeah. I look for people with high slope.
Hmm.
So um, you could either recruit for a one very specific skill, like I want somebody who has specific experience with this one particular thing. But the nature of startups is you're solving unique problems every day. You know, um, for example, like your biggest source of users decides to shut down overnight. What do you do? Like there's no playbook for this. You have to just kind of think from first principles, but also like claw your way and like just throw Hail Marys and like try everything. Or a really big trillion-dollar company sends you a cease and desist letter. Like, what do you do?
Have you gotten any more of those?
Can't say. Can't
Yes.
say.
Perfect.
Yeah. Um, but you want to work with people that can pick up new things and like learn new things, and they're a multiplier. So when they join a team, you aren't linearly growing the team, you're multiplying. So you want people that are multipliers. They will take a finite amount of resources and make so much more out of those resources. So high learning rate and like yeah,
Basically
multipliers.
add. I think that kind of comes back also to like just bring people on that have lots of energy and have like the right vibes. I
Yeah.
used to like underprice vibes, but I genuinely think that if some, if people enjoy showing up to work,
Yeah.
that's like half the battle. It's like the thing that kills startups is literally just the founder waking up one day and saying, I'm going to do anything other than the thing that is my company.
Yeah.
And then the thing's dead. It's over.
And morale, like
Exactly, exactly. I would, so you are also really good at like getting in touch with powerful people and like making them your friends. You've done with this with like even Jensen and I think, Guillaume or like Ronch. I think that's how you say his name. Like,
oversell.
yeah,
Yeah, Guillermo.
Guillermo. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. How do you think about like deciding who to look up to and then like making them your friends?
I think you'd be surprised. I think people are more approachable than you think.
Hmm.
People, you know, you so Guillermo, I met him. So I was at this happy hour for like engineers
Mhm.
back in 2022, and he was there talking about like his journey building Vercel. And after the chat, he was just surrounded by this crowd of people. So I want to take a photo with him. They want to like talk to him about Vercel, and like I was the only one in that crowd that told him about my company and asked if he would invest. And all the people could have asked. And there's no rule like you can't ask. You know, turns out he's a human being. I just like sent him an email. Hey, this is what I'm working on after, and he's like, I'm in. So, it's um the worst that can happen is they say no, right? So I think it's um people underestimate how much human these people are, because 5 years ago, 10 years ago, a few decades ago, they were in your shoes.
Yeah. And they
um
remember.
they remember, yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that like the best founders not only, they study the greats, but when they actually become great, they eventually also try to help,
Yeah.
newer founders up.
I've heard a story of like Steve Jobs calling
Hewlett Packard.
Hewlett Packard
Yeah.
Mr. Packard, I think, or
Yeah,
Bill
he's like
Hewlett.
I
Yeah.
think he wanted parts for what I forgot exactly which it was some like measuring device.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Yes, we'll give you the parts, and also, do you want to just have a job over the summer?" And I think Steve Jobs was like 14,
Yeah.
and he did, and
Yeah.
that's how he got his first job.
I love it. Yeah, exactly. So you can just do things,
Just do things. Okay. Final question: what's the hardest thing you've overcome?
I don't know, man. I think they all seem easy once you overcome them. You know, they seem super hard in the moment, but then once you overcome them, it's just like
You just forget.
you just forget. You move forward. So I think the hardest thing that I have to overcome is yet to come yet. I mean, it's probably around the corner. But then once you overcome, it just seem very surmountable. The things that seem unsurmountable are,
It sounds a lot like I remember Sam Altman saying that like the first crisis that feels world ending, you're like, oh my God, is everything over? But then the seventh time it happens, you're like, oh well, I survived the first six, so I'm probably fine.
yeah,
We'll
yeah,
make it through.
yeah.
Okay, that's a great place to end it.
Thanks for having me,
Okay.
man. I appreciate it.